big American cruisers on UK roads. I wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like owning big 1900cc cruiser in the UK, and whether or not, you know, if it's on your list of things that you want, whether or not you should get one. I think there's a giveaway on my opinion, considering I'm riding around on one currently, but I think the conversation is a little bit more nuanced than that, particularly for our roads around here. I think there are lots of options in the cruiser market. It is predominantly, you know, Harley Davidson and then Indian coming in, and then you've got some options from like Honda and things like that. And I'm not talking about your smaller Chinese import like little 125s and things like that. I'm talking big, heavy, air-cooled cruiser motorcycles, and what they like to kind of live with on our roads, and whether or not they're suitable, really. And personally, I think they are great fun. I love them. They're comfy, they're fun, noisy, a bit in your face, a bit over the top, which are all things that I really like in a motorbike. They aren't, you know, they're the way that they deliver power and the speed that you get from these bikes is not the same as a sports bike. You don't get your arms ripped off. You're not gonna, you know, do 70, 80, 90 miles an hour in first gear. Yeah, depending on the cruiser. If you've got yourself one of the Harleys or something like that, the Iron 887 I think it is, I don't think you're going to be doing much above 90 on that thing most of the time. And this bike is completely uncomfortable to ride anywhere close to triple digits. It's not designed for that. It's a cruiser. It's designed to be a chilled out, comfortable, fun ride, which I personally think the Indian Chief absolutely nails. And that comes in with the, is it worth having a cruiser like this in the UK? I think yes, if it's the right cruiser. So for me, this one's great. It handles pretty well. It's, you know, I'm never going to get my knee down on the bloody thing, but that's not what you're all about. But it does handle itself well. It's very composed in the corners, and, you know, it will handle a country lane. You've got to take into account its sheer weight. You know, this bike is the heaviest bike I've owned, and I come from a not a very long background of motorcycles by any stretch. I've only been riding for less than a decade, but in that time I've had a CB 650R, a Gixxer 750, a Triumph Tiger 800. My 125 was a Mutt 125 Mutt Hilts, which I was absolutely in love with. I think that's one of the best starter bikes. Unfortunately, Mutt went bust, didn't they? But there are, you know, I've had the Naked Adventure and sports bike, and I've got the cruiser, and I've got to admit, I have more fun point to point on this bike than I do on any of the others. Now, the Gixxer was amazing in its own way because it was, you know, a Gixxer 750. It was a K4. It was a fantastic machine. Then the CB650R, that was a naked bike, and that was, you know, my first big bike, and it was proper fun. I really enjoyed that, but I don't know, it after a year or so it stopped ticking the kind of itch for me, and I found myself, I had the CB650R and the Triumph Tiger in the garage at the same time, and I found the CB gathering dust, and I was riding the Tiger all the time. So I sold the CB and got the Gixxer. And what I found is the Tiger was my go-to bike, the adventure bike, and I will get another adventure bike, absolutely, because I think for, you know, dealing with all the shitty conditions and commuting and stuff like that, I think that's the perfect tool, whereas this is a bit more of a weekend warrior thing. And I liken this bike to what was my favourite car, which was a 20-odd-year-old Land Rover Defender 90 with the TD5 engine in it. You know, my main purpose when owning that car was keeping water out of it and oil in it, and it was just a continuous battle to be able to do that. and I found myself absolutely in love with it, because it was an event to get that car to 70. It was a very rare event as well. I'd never get more than 80 miles an hour out of that car, and it wasn't happy doing it. And like this bike, it's above 80, it's not that fun, but getting there, and with all the low down torque and how this bike delivers its power, you know, the vast majority of this bike's power is delivered by 2000 rpm, like, which is just, it's hilarious. There's no getting away from it. It's just fun. But you know, if you're looking for something to go out and rip around on the streets and things, which, you know, fair play to you, it's no longer my cup of tea. It's not something that I want to do anymore. Mostly because I don't think our roads are fit for it. You know, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to want to do it at a track, which I still want to do some track days and bits like that. But you know, this bike is not for, you know, it's for this. This is what it's all about. But it's got the fun on tap for sure, but it's not ridiculous. The only thing I'd say is the challenge which I've got with owning a big American cruiser in the UK is the weight of it in and around when you're negotiating like car parks and bits like that, and you know, pushing this bike around in the garage is a bit of a chore. It's a big fat heifer of a bike, and she's very nicely balanced, I've got to admit. Like, you don't feel anything but control with her, and that's why I think if you're going to get yourself a cruiser or a big American bike or something along these lines, you need to, congratulations, you absolute pillock. You need to get something that can handle the corners. Yeah, we've got very twisty, bendy roads in this country if you're staying off the highways and motorways, and I think you need to get a cruiser that can handle that. It's like, yeah, you can muscle around a Harley or one of the big road glides or something like that, but from what I tried, and I did have a go on a couple and potter about, and I found them to be a lot harder work than this is to ride. And I think you've got the nice compromise of it's got a reasonable amount of tech on it. You've got the adjustable dials and bits like that. It's got reasonable suspension, but nothing to write home about. But the sum of its parts is more than the individual components, in my opinion. I think it does hold itself very, very well. And I've been generally pleased with this bike all along. There's very little I dislike about it, and what I have disliked I've addressed with, you know, adding some spotlights so that I've got a little bit more light in the dark, because where I live there's no country lights, street lights or anything like that, so it gets very dark in the country lanes. And the dark fly screen, because it was essentially a naked bike, so you get battered by the wind a little bit. So they're kind of the key takeaways for me. I'm going to enjoy this 60 mile an hour bit, not bother talking because it's going to get windy, and I'll pick up with you again in a moment. I think there's something to be said about these bikes. It depends on who you're trying to impress. So yes, this is a pretty bike and I do get a lot of looks on it, but I like being on this bike. I think stuff like the Gixxer 750, that was a bike to impress other people more than to impress myself. The Tiger was very much a bike for me, which is why I think the Tiger 800 and this have been my two favourite bikes, because they are bikes specifically purposed for me. And I'm not buying them because, oh, other people have got a sports bike and this. I only know one or two people who own cruisers. Most other people I know are on, you know, hyper nakeds or super nakeds or super bikes, sports bikes, that sort of thing. But yeah, this is the bike I bought because I wanted this bike. So I'd be really interested in other people's thoughts on the, you know, why they buy the bikes and bits like that. I've found myself, you know, originally trying to go with the flow and buying bikes similar to what my friends ride and things like that, which is great if you're riding with them on a regular basis. But then I moved, yeah, an hour or so away from most of the guys that I used to ride with as I moved in with my wife and bits like that. And there was an element of, actually, I want the bike that is the right bike for me and for where I am. And I do think these things are great fun. They are, I will probably do one of those lists of like the best things and the worst things. The most challenging thing for this is the sheer weight. She's a big old heavy Hector and does require a little bit of care and appreciation for the simple girth of her. And it's a completely different beast to sports bikes and things like that. I mean, I love the idea of getting myself one of the lightweight adventure bikes, like the little Vosges 300 or KTM 390, something like that would be amazing fun, I reckon. But it's all to complement what I've got already with this thing. Like, this is just such a cool bike to go around, and it's a bike that I quite often find myself just going into the garage to fiddle with and wipe down, tidy up, look at this, put a bag on, take a bag off, just continuously messing about with it because I love it. And it's if you're gonna buy an Indian or a Harley or something like that, then if you've got that feel about it, then it's going to be the right bike for you at the end of the day. You just need to appreciate that you can't go absolutely tear-assing around on some of the country lanes. You're going to hit your pegs if you're cornering too aggressively. If you get it off balance, you're going to have to be able to muscle it back. And I think a good rule with any bike is if you drop it, you've got to be able to pick the bugger up. I'm quite comfortable. I can pick this thing up if I drop it down or anything, but I wouldn't want to. And I was well practiced at picking up the Tiger. I did some off-roading on that and was able to pick that up about a dozen times in one ride, because it's a previous video. I was a bit of an idiot. I was doing off-roading on road tyres on a very road orientated adventure bike, but I did have a lot of fun and I did have an adventure, so it did all work in the end. But you'd certainly not be able to do that sort of thing on this. Although saying that, me and a couple of friends, we are planning on going up to Scotland, and there are going to be some gravel tracks and things, and if I do that, it's going to be on this bike, and we're going to see what it's like taking this thing into some slightly gnarlier conditions than it's probably ever been in, so we'll see how we go on that. This is what this bike's about, right? The 50 to 60 mile an hour rolling along is just beautiful. I have yet to experience anything as relaxing as riding a bike like this at a comfortable speed and just bowling about. And don't get me wrong, the Chief, it's it is fun. It does have the power for you to be a bit of a tit if you want to be, and you can push this bike and you can absolutely have a proper blast on it, but it never feels really that happy, and I don't think you'll find a cruiser that does. I've ridden a couple of Harleys previously, smaller capacity than this, but I found them to be almost more of a wrestle to be able to ride them like you would ride this. And I suppose part of that is just experience, because I went straight from a sports bike to trying one of those, and they were a bit like very alien to what I was used to. And I'd say now I've got a lot of seat time on this one. It's only about 4,000 miles, but I feel I can get more out of this bike than I could out of one of those Harleys. So yeah, that's kind of it really. If what I think is a fantastic bike for the UK roads. Do I think an adventure bike or something with longer travel suspension is better suited for the shitty conditions and where I live in the countryside? Yeah, absolutely. Would I have the same fizzy feeling when I'm looking back at my bike in the garage, or when I park it up at outside a coffee shop or something like that. No, I don't think I would. In fact, I know I wouldn't, because I love the Tiger, and if I can, I'll get another Tiger 800 at some point. I think they're fantastic bikes, but it's just a completely different beast. This thing just makes me smile every time I ride it or look at it. It's so fun, and it's a bike where you don't have to rush. Like, I like chilling out this thing, and poodling, I suppose, is the best way to put it. I like poodling about and just enjoying the bike for what it is. And yeah, I can be a tit when I want to be, which always helps. Oh, something which I have done, which I should probably talk about, is I've redesigned the Strange Monkey website. So what I was talking about there, where you got to think about who you want to impress and bits like that. I actually have a t-shirt on the website which is an Impress Yourself t-shirt. I'm very much of the mindset that the riding should be for you. I know guys, and I fully admire them for going out and wanting to absolutely rip and tear the shit up whenever they go out, but as long as you're doing it for yourself. The only time I've ever found myself getting in trouble on a bike is when I've been trying to catch up or play to other people's levels, whenever they're usually more experienced than I am, more capable, and I've ended up catching myself out a couple of times. Gotta love it when you see the learners out. More people on bikes is what we need. Many more people on bikes.